changes here on the dais. This is my fourth session, same as you, we're classmates. I've done many formal meetings. Usually a formal meeting is just to vote out a bill. Oftentimes we have to have those formal meetings on the floor of the House or in another room because there's no chamber available. But that's not the case here. We're in our official chamber. We're doing more than just voting. We're going to be having a robust discussion about major changes, and we're not turning on the live stream. So I just think it's disingenuous to say that we're going by typical House rules or typical House procedure, because this is not typical. And I won't belabor the point. I just want to say that there are a lot of people across this state who have suspicions about this bill, suspicions about its motivations, suspicions about the money behind it, suspicions about the tactics used to pass it, and this does not help.
Chairman Frank.
I think calling you disingenuous, which I feel like is what you just said, that this is disingenuous. These are not, informal meetings are not held with the live stream. And to say it's disingenuous to the chairman, I think is disingenuous.
Mr. Chairman.
All right. Yes, Representative Tallarico.
I just wanted to respond to Chairman Frank, and I appreciate that. What I'm trying to say is that it's not a typical formal meeting, and to characterize it that way to the public that are in the room, I feel like is not reflective of reality. And I appreciate that folks from the lobby are here and the media, but I'm talking about our constituents in Amarillo, in Beaumont, in McAllen, in El Paso, who cannot be in this room, but this bill will affect them. And one of these bills, I fear, will defund their local schools. They have a right to hear what we're about to discuss on this dais.
All right, any more questions? All right. All right. The chair lays out as pending business House Bill 2 by Buckley relating to the public education and public school finance. Relating to public education and public school finance. The chair offers a committee substitute. Members, first I want to thank you all for your help with House Bill 2. Since the layout on March the 4th, the dialogue between members on this dais has been productive. I believe that the testimony that we heard with 2 days of hearings, where we took a day to bring in experts and invited testimony, was productive. And then we spent an entire day on public testimony on March the 6th to hear from citizens across the state of Texas. And many of the things that were heard in that testimony are now included in that committee substitute. Many of the things brought to me as concerns by members of this committee are in the committee substitute. And when, at the last moment, when we were trying to get it right and trying to make sure that we had the impact that we needed for our public schools, and I could not deliver the runs in a manner that I felt was fair to members to look them over, I postponed the committee hearing. And so that's why we're here today. And I appreciate, first of all, your willingness to postpone the hearing and to continue to do the good work that we do. But most especially, I want to thank Vice Chair Bernal and his team. We've spent hours together talking about ways, and these are words coined by my good friend Vice Chairman Bernal. And it was basically Buckley, and this was as filed, Buckley House Bill 2 does a lot of good, but we need to make sure that we keep this about the classroom. And so today, that is our effort. And my commitment to each and every one of you is for you to understand that today is just another step in the long process of what it takes to pass a historic funding bill for public education. Many of you on this dais have participated in that in the past, and you understand the fact that it's a complicated system that often picks winners and losers. And as we look at the data and we think about the language in the bill, we want to make sure that we take care of our school districts across the state, from the coast to the Panhandle, from the Sabine River to El Paso. That is our audience, and that's who we are. That's who we're working for. I'm also proud to have our Vice Chairman as a joint author on this bill. And I told him that is my commitment, that we will continue to work together to make sure to get this right. Today, I'd like to highlight some of the changes you'll see in the committee substitute for House Bill 2. Members, this bill still represents nearly $8 billion of funding for our public schools. Again, this is more money for the Texas public schools than any other prior piece of legislation, and this is a landmark thing for Texas schools. First, one of our big concerns from both the invited testimony and our public hearing was the basic allotment. This bill has increased the basic allotment that in the filed version increased by $220 to $395 for the basic allotment is $6,555. And it includes an ongoing increase in the BA every biennium that ties it to the growth in statewide property values through the golden penny yield. Another important point to understand that in that testimony, tying the BA to some sort of inflationary adjustment was heard loud and clear. This means we'll have more predictable increases in the basic allotment, and we'll fund all districts equally this way and further reduce recapture for those districts that are impacted by that process. The basic allotment is the most fair and equitable way to drive dollars where they need to be, and that is in the classroom. The committee sub also modifies existing statutes, prioritize increases from the BA to go towards salary increases for our teachers. And I want to especially thank Vice Chairman Bernal that recognized another key point from testimony is that too often those dollars go to starting teacher pay, where teachers with experience of 5 years and 10 years or so, as they go up the ladder, if you will, there is a ladder. This bill prioritizes teachers with 5 or more years of experience and 10 or more years of experience, with a desire to keep the best teachers in our classrooms. The bill also includes a formula transition grant, as current law says, to make sure that no district receives less than $200 increase per student. Now, let me be perfectly clear. When we looked at our runs, the runs that we delayed the hearing for, we found that there was disparity between districts, as there always is in any school funding bill. And that's why today from this dais you have my commitment to continue to work on that problem. We can start at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning for whoever's willing, because we'll be starting to do that, to find out, to make sure that all of our districts receive the much needed funding that they need. Additionally, pre-K has been added to the early education allotment, increasing money to districts and incentivizing more full-day pre-K offerings to Texas families. In the committee substitute, we've also increased all 3 emergent bilingual weights to provide an additional $450 million to districts to strengthen bilingual education. If you'll think back to the hearings, one of the things that the state of Texas, from public testimony to invited witnesses, they said down to the last person, was that we are doing well delivering bilingual education services that is so important to our state. And this bill makes an additional $450 million investment in that. Members, I want you to note that we've removed the high school advising allotment, since that policy is also embedded in House Bill 120, carried by Representative Keith Bell, which recently passed unanimously from this committee. The committee substitute for House Bill 2 also has removed much of the educator preparation language and focused on strengthening our existing Grow Your Own program, establishing it as an allotment which equips our districts to recruit and train teachers from their communities to earn a degree and their teacher certification. Members, what this does is it allows our districts to challenge and encourage high school students to enter the teacher pipeline. It also encourages paraprofessionals with 60 hours of college credit to enter the teacher pipeline and become an educator. I appreciate the comments from the committee concerned about some of the elements of the educator prep language, and you will no longer find that in this committee substitute. The bill also provides a phased-in approach to ensuring teachers in our classrooms are certified, and provides a stipend in the amount of $1,000 for districts to help them receive their certifications. Members, one of the things that we know is that the bill originally created a target for 0 uncertified teachers in our classrooms in a very short period of time. Well, immediately after the hearing, local superintendents from my district, one assistant superintendent who happens to be my spouse, said, "That sounds great, but let me tell you how hard that is." So what this does, this puts our districts on a much needed glide slope to increase teacher certification, but it also recognizes that in August you have to have school, and that 0% certifications is something I know our districts will strive for, but we also must face the harsh realities that we must grow the teacher pipeline. We've only highlighted a few of the updates today in the committee substitute, and these things are on top of many of the great aspects that are in the filed legislation and remain there today, such as significant increase in special education funding and a change in the way that we fund special education, moving away from a seat count to intensity of service model that better reflects the cost of education to deliver those services to special education students in Texas public schools. The small and mid-size allotment remains in the bill. The expansion of the teacher incentive allotment to make sure the best teachers in our classrooms remain there, that they're on a pathway to earning 6 figures, and that they're rewarded for their hard work, but also for their incredible outcomes. Significant investments, $880 million of additional investments in compensatory education to help target those most at risk that literally are scattered across the state of Texas in significant numbers in nearly every school district. Property value study grants to make sure that when the local CAD and the comptroller are having disagreements about property values, that our school districts don't take it all on the chin and lose hundreds of thousands to millions of dollars in funding in something that they have 0 control over. It remains in the bill. Regional insurance support to support those districts who have seen insurance costs increase by the thousands of percents, taking dollars directly from the classroom simply to pay the premiums. And there's more in this bill. Members, I want to thank you again for all your help with this legislation, but I also want to ask for your help as we move forward over the next several days. The committee substitute for House Bill 2 represents a strategic, student-centered investment in public education. It provides teacher support and a substantial investment in special education, all while ensuring district flexibility. I look forward to working with all of you to ensure that this bill and other House priority funding bills, such as House Bill 120, House Bill 123, and House Bill 124, move forward through the Texas House and deliver the necessary resources to our students and our schools. And before I open up to questions, I'd like to recognize Vice Chairman Bernal for any comments he may have on the committee substitute for House Bill 2.
Thank you, Chairman. This is why I'm here. Like, this is why I came to the building, is to do this work. Everything else is important, but for me, everything else is everything else. And so, having done this before, one, I want to thank the chairman and the committee, because I think we've seen the way that the bill has evolved based on the things that we've heard from public testimony, from the people that we care about in the public education space. We can see that the bill has evolved, and I think there's still an opportunity to do that. And that's the part I want to talk about the most, which is we're at a moment now where we're better, but between now and the floor, there's still opportunity to do a lot of work. I fully recognize, and I mean this in the most respectful way, that there's still work to do, that there are still some things that we have to resolve or fix. There are districts, including some of my own, that when you look at them, there's something that needs to be smoothed over, fixed, resolved. And I have no doubt that we can do that. I really appreciate the chairman's offer to sort of open up the office from 9 o'clock Friday or Monday and start working together on those pieces, and my preference is that we get it done early so that the time between then and the floor is just getting the basic pieces, but we can go through everyone's districts and get it right. In every big bill, there are going to be pieces that you're not always thrilled about. I get that. But I think the good pieces, the big pieces here are really significant. And for the parts that need work, I think I really believe that we can get to them and make them what they're supposed to be. And I'm going to give you an example. I'm going to shoot my shot right now with all you guys. As an example of what can happen between now and the floor, it's something that I've been looking at. I've talked to the chairman about it. No commitments, but I want to give you an example of the things that can happen if we keep working. So for those of you who may not know, Texas currently funds pre-K at a half day, right? Every other student, K to 12, gets a full day amount of money, but pre-K gets a half day. And we've talked a long time since I've been here, and this is my 6th session. We've talked about getting ourselves to full day pre-K, and for whatever reason or a variety of reasons, we haven't done it. So put that here. The comp ed weight increase is 0.005. Okay, it adds up to about 880 million. Sounds like a lot. It is a lot. In the grand scheme of things throughout the state, that comes out to about $32 a kid. And that $32 at any given campus, even the ones that I went to in San Antonio, doesn't do really as much as we'd like it to do. However, if you take the 880 that comp ed generates, you take the pre-K being added to the early ed allotment, that's 110 million, and you take the full day pre-K partnerships, and you put that money together, all of a sudden, you have the dollar amount needed to fund pre-K at a full day, right? So maybe I might, on the floor, after talking with everybody, offer an amendment that takes these dollar amounts, puts them together, and puts Texas in a position to fund full day pre-K. That is the kind of work I think still is available and remains between now and then. And this is on top of making sure that everyone's districts are either winners or big winners. I am hopeful enough to believe that that is what we're doing, and that we're doing it all in good faith. And that's a standard that I'm going to hold myself to, and a standard I'm going to hold everyone else on the dais to as well. And I look forward to it, because as hard as it is, as challenging as it is, I love this. So I just can't wait to keep working. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Vice Chair. All right, members, I'll be happy to answer any questions. Mr. Bryant.
Mr. Chairman, notwithstanding all the glowing comments, this bill is a catastrophe for 10 of the largest school districts in the state, maybe more than that, who are receiving under the provisions of this bill well less than the average increase in funding experienced by the rest of the state. Now, I'm only speaking about the top 49 school districts in size, and 10 to 12 of those. I'm not commenting on the many other districts that are smaller than this that are also disadvantaged. And they're principally disadvantaged because the bill continues to contain language which takes away the promise in 2023 that the districts will be held harmless from the effects of the homestead exemption increase and the compression policy when we implemented extensive tax relief in that session of the legislature. It is an easy fix simply to eliminate the language that eliminates the whole harmless. And it's a matter of great distress with these districts and with the many others that are not on the list of the largest 49 that has not been done already. Notwithstanding every positive thing that may have been said about this bill, in my own district in Dallas, we will not be able to operate in the second year of the biennium if these numbers are not changed. of the district is already, because of what took place in 2023 in this legislature, $180 million in deficit operations, utilizing its reserve funds to operate. It's just one of many that are in that situation. Inasmuch as a vote for this bill is a vote for the policy in this bill, I cannot, under the current circumstances, vote for it. If the chairman has any specific assurances to make with regard to this, I think it would be beneficial if we heard those.
Thank you, Mr. Bryant. Well, first of all, I want to thank Dr. Elizalde and Mr. Segura, both superintendents of Dallas and Austin ISD, for a great conversation about this very issue yesterday. And appreciate to have about an hour and 15-minute conversation with those school leaders to talk about their concerns about the bill. In it, we had a great discussion about the hold harmless provisions. I believe that Dallas is held harmless to the tune of about $80 million, and Austin to the tune of about $20 million. And I think if that's what you look at, if you look at the data, and you have my commitment to make sure we find a fit. You know, we have a $200 funding floor. I have a district in my district that is not a Dallas or an Austin. As a matter of fact, it has about 2,000 kids, and it joins them in what I'd say less than enthusiastic increases. And so what we've learned, I believe, is that when you pull one string in the school finance system, it unravels something else. And our job over the next several days will be how to sew that together in a manner that continues to lift those that did not receive the increase that we expected. This is not anything aberrant or abnormal in a school finance bill. I remember 2019 seeing some run. I was just a freshman member and being completely underwhelmed. But I do know at the end of the process, it was historic for my school districts. And so you have my commitment to work with every member on this dais to begin to sew that back together so that we get it right. And I appreciate the real in-depth conversation with those leaders from Austin and Dallas, and we will continue to have that, and we will we'll set the time up, and we need to start working at least Monday morning at 9 o'clock. Mr. Bryant?
Well, why are we voting a bill out that is so significantly flawed for, I was just eyeballing it, yes, more than 1 million of our 5.5 million students? Why wouldn't we wait and fix it? This is a committee. The purpose of a committee is to write a bill that we can all see out in the open, offer amendments and so forth. Why wouldn't we do it here in the committee? Why are we being asked to vote this bill out today with such an enormous flaw in it?
Well, I would say that you have to look at the process, you know, as it is that we know that there is a timeline where we need to be able to have meaningful discussions on this. The bill needs to get to the floor, and my commitment is to have the bill right when we get it to the floor. You know, my desire was, which is impossible, and let's just keep this real clear, that when we looked at the runs, the runs that got to you late, the ones that I delayed the hearing by 2 days for, you know, when we started having folks that do school finance chime in, there is no one that agrees what the outcome is. But our gold standard is the LBB. That is who we'll make our decisions on. You know, other, very smart people, some folks that are in this room right now, have chimed in with districts, and their runs don't match what LBB said. And so, I mean, I think that's the issue with this, is that, you kick the can, you kick the can, you kick the can, you kick the can, and you run out of time. We have had good faith discussions over the last several weeks to get this bill right. These are complicated bills. We will vote on this bill today, and we will, I believe with the support of this committee, begin work to get it right and get it to the floor here when it's ready to go.
Well, what is get it right? What do you mean by that? What result are you promising to obtain between now and the time the bill gets to the floor, if it's voted out?
My commitment is to work to make sure that we are, that districts feel like and understand that the investments headed their way can be meaningful to them. And that depends who you ask. You know, the conversation with Dallas was very different than the conversation with Austin of what they think perfection looks like. So there's two districts in the same boat, Mr. Bryant, that don't really agree on what that ought to be because our districts are so unique. And so, you know, I mean, I think if you want to make perfection be the enemy of the good, and if you think we can sit on this dais and talk this thing, I will tell you what we need to do is we need to pass the bill out of this committee and we need to get it right so we can get it to the floor and then let the Texas House weigh in on this. Because our constituency is obviously our school districts, but more so, it is our, 135 colleagues as well, and the impact it has on their district, sir.
Well, but I ask, what specifically is it you're going to do between now and the floor that addresses this problem? I didn't hear the answer to that.
The answer to that is we know we have some districts. I know in my district and in your district and in Representative Hinojos's and Chairman Leach's district and really across this dais and Chairman Dutton's district, where we felt like that when you're making this type of investment that we didn't get the increase in the per student funding that we expected. And my goal is to improve that to where we can make it more fair for districts to make sure they're getting the resources that they need.
Then why are we being asked to vote it out of committee before that happens?
Because the bill is before us in a manner that the process of the school finance system to understand when you pull a thread and I pull a thread that it doesn't drive Vice Chair Bernal in the ditch. And so that's what we need to do. We need to get the baseline set, which we have here in this bill, and then we need to continue to work on that, and we will have, my intent is to have a perfecting amendment that will speak to these issues that you bring up today and what others bring up today. Because what I need to have is I need to have a commitment from this committee that we agree in the process of what we're doing. We may not agree with every outcome. I have several districts in my House district, and some of which did very, very well. I have a similar district that has nearly the same demographics and metrics that didn't. We're going to get to the bottom of that. We'll get to the bottom of the Dallas problem and the Austin problem and the Allen problem. I mean, that's my commitment. But the process here today, before us today is pending business, and we will vote this bill today, and we'll start work on it this afternoon if you like.
Well, I've served in two different legislative bodies at two different levels, and nobody's ever asked me before to vote against the very people who sent me here. And that's what you're asking me to do, to vote aye on this bill without even a specific commitment to fix the very thing I'm talking about. I'm not hearing that commitment except a general commitment.
Well, let me
So,
do this. I'll put it this way. I'm committed to making sure that we get it right for our school districts. And your job is to advocate on behalf of your school district, what I believe is nearly entirely, and I don't want to speak for you, I can't recall, but probably mainly Dallas. And then Representative Kerwin has her constituency of districts, mine and Talrico and everyone else. And it is my job and all of us together to work to make sure as we pull the thread to help Dallas that we don't impact someone else and that we do so in a fair way. And that's my commitment to you, and that's what I intend to do. And I know the Vice Chair and I will begin to work, and everyone is welcome at the table, and we will continue the work. I think you can't, I hope you can recognize the difference in the bill as filed versus the bill presented before you today in the committee substitute. I think describing that any other way than significant change would not be accurate. You may not like necessarily, and the outcome may not be what you expected, nor was it what I expected in all cases, but it is a significantly different bill than what came before us before. And I expect with the bill we take to the floor, with the perfecting amendments and the great work of this committee, then we will have an entirely different product that comes off that floor. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Who's first? Representative Talrico.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We're considering two bills today. This is the first of two. This is certainly the bill I like better than the second one. And I do want to acknowledge the work that you and Vice Chair Bernal have done to make this bill better. This bill is in a better spot. But I do want to echo Representative Bryan's point that it is hurting many of our districts that need a lot of help. And I do think this bill can be a good step forward. You know, heck, I would vote for a $1 increase for public education funding. But I want to be careful that we don't overpromise our constituents, because we said that this was a historic school funding bill, but our schools are in a historic hole. And this bill does not even catch us up to 2019 funding levels. And I think that's very important for everyone to understand, just so that we as a legislature are not overpromising what this bill does, even though there are many good aspects to it, and it is a step forward. But I asked every school district when we had public testimony if this bill would catch them up to 2019 funding levels, and each one of them said no. The basic allotment is the foundational part of the school finance formula. We heard testimony from every expert that said we needed an increase of about $1,400 per student in the basic allotment to catch us up to 2019 funding levels. Can you tell us what the current increase of the basic allotment is in this version of the bill?
$395. And just in the spirit of discussion, I would suggest you take that argument about the basic allotment and talk to the folks that lead your schools, because that was not always what was relayed to me. And we do make significant investments in the basic allotment, and we also have a mechanism for inflationary increases every 2 years in the basic allotment. But some significant districts have been in my office to say, you know, that is not necessarily, I mean, that is a wonderful talking point, and it's wonderful to have the little meter where you fidget with the basic allotment and you watch the funding go up. But the reality is, when you do the runs, you know, here's what's interesting about the runs. If you increase the basic allotment $395, I bet everybody in here, if we had a little class, a little math class, we'd say, I bet funding probably goes up $395 per kid. Who would think that's probably right? Oh, you don't have to raise your hands. I perform. Well, the reality is, the way the system works, it doesn't. Okay? So you could put $1,000 in the basic allotment and still have a district that gains $200 a kid. That's the complexity we're dealing with. So again, I appreciate the talking point. It's simple to do that, and I'm not accusing you to do that. I'm just saying the reason we have to move forward is because we have to wade into the weeds of that, and we have to put inputs in and get them out the other side to make sure that we solve the problems you want to solve, and we share that desire to do that. And that's why we need to move forward. So, I mean, that's what I have learned, digging into the school finance system, is that there is sort of the narrative that makes the Facebook, and then there is sort of the reality of what helps schools, and those two things can be very different. And that is what, that was literally shared with me by superintendents yesterday.
Well, I just want to clarify, every district I represent has asked me to increase the basic allotment, and I believe every school finance expert who testified here during the public testimony said the basic allotment should be higher. But even if we disagree on the importance of the basic allotment, does this bill catch our schools up to 2019 funding levels? After 6 years of rampant inflation, does this bill catch our schools up to 2019 funding levels?
I think it does for some schools, if you look at the runs.
Which schools are those?
It's probably your smaller schools, some of your mid-sized schools.
Would you say most schools in Texas are going to be caught up to 2019 funding levels?
I don't have that type of depth of knowledge of individual districts, because each one is very different. When you have schools that come in and that we visited with, and I've talked with districts from 300 kids to 180,000 kids, and they'll tell you vastly different financial stories. I had one district tell me, we don't need, listen to this, we don't need money for a teacher pay raise. We have that. We've had other districts talk about, hey, we really would rather see the funding go this way. I mean, there's all kinds of different opinions on that. And so, I mean, I think that speaks to the complexity of the issue before us.
The primary, I think we just heard in the discussion between you and Representative Bryant, that the reason that a lot of our large urban districts are not getting significant gains in this bill is because of the hold harmless provision. What would be the cost of fixing that problem, roughly? Do we have an idea?
I think it varies. I mean, it depends of which hold harmless provisions you look at. It looks, I've heard as little as $600 million to over $1 billion. It just depends on how you do it. And every district is different. And my fear is on the, on any provision that we make, is that we have to, or any change to any provision, and we have to make sure we see the outputs on the other side, how they impact it, or you simply end up sort of solving maybe my problem and your problem and Representative Bryant's problem, and then I create a problem for Chairman Dutton. That's what I think that's the way I look at it. I look at it in terms of what gets districts to where we're members, and that's really who, in consultation with their districts, get us to a place we feel like we can agree that this is the place to move forward on.
And so far in the discussions I've been a part of, the consensus, as much as you can never have consensus in school finance, the consensus seems to be that to solve this problem for our big urban districts with lots of poor kids in them is to address hold harmless. The problem, I think it's fair to say, is that's an expensive fix. That's the reason we're having to figure this out, because if it was a simple, cheap fix, we would just do it. But it could cost up to $1 billion to solve this problem. What is the fiscal note for the bill we're about to hear next?
I'm sorry.
What's the fiscal note in the first biennium for the bill we're going to hear after this one?
$1 billion.
$1 billion?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Hinojosa.
Well, first, I want to say I appreciate you lowering the number of TEA FTEs in the bill. I'm assuming
I forgot to put that in my write-up.
There's no fiscal note yet, but it looks like it's reduced. When should we expect a fiscal note on this bill?
I suspect we'll probably within the next 5-6 days.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I want to also echo the concerns expressed by Representative Bryant, Representative Talarico. Also, I think this should be televised or broadcast. I see a lot of my people here, and these are the hardcore supporters of public schools, and I'm so glad they're here. But there's a lot of people who can't make it, and I do think this is significant enough that it should have been televised. Speaking of the language that Representative Bryant brought up, and so that's on page 30, and it is my understanding that the $900 million problem is this line that says that we would take districts back to as they exist on September 1, 2022. And so that makes districts have to eat the hold harmless that we gave them for property taxes. It is my understanding that it is not only a pretty large, substantial impact to this school finance bill and to our overall districts, but that it also just doesn't sit right. I mean, we're considering property taxes this session too. Last time we did this, we made a promise to our districts. I mean, let me say that nobody wants property tax reduction more than people in my district, given especially the amount that we pay in recapture and that our property values are through the roof. I want property tax reduction just like anybody else, but I don't want to do it on the backs of our students. And I know my district doesn't support that. And I know this is complicated stuff, and this probably was not what was intended, but I'm asking, don't make a liar out of me, because when I voted for property tax reduction, it was with the commitment that it wasn't on the backs of our students and that our students would not suffer a decrease in their school funding. And so I'm just asking, not only because of the substantive impact, but what it means when we go back on our word.
Well, as discussions we've had offline and we'll have it, I guess, technically now in public. I believe the hold harmless provision is one of the things we have to look at. And here's what I think, what we need to keep in context. The hold harmless doesn't hold everyone the same. So what holds you harmless may harm me. And so that's sort of the theory, if you will, of the case, as you attorneys say, of why we we're working towards that more equitable funding to make certain. Now, the desire, be clear, nobody loses money in this bill, in no runs. There were no negative numbers, okay? It was simply that some, including some of my districts, did not reach that level that we were, that I was hoping. And I know for members on this dais were hoping. And so that's one of the things we need to look at, and you have my commitment to do that as we look and model it to make sure. Again, I have to know what the output is. You need to know what the real output is, but by what we do. And that's what happens in my office or Bernal's office Monday at 9 or mine tomorrow afternoon or what have you. We'll begin to do that. You have my word.
Well, I appreciate that. The fix to this hold harmless that was proposed for this version of the bill would phase out the hold harmless over, I think it's a couple of bienniums. And the other challenge with that is, while it may be more money now for districts, if that money goes away and we're obligated, our school districts are obligated to spend 40% of the increase on our teachers as pay raises, what do our districts do when that's not there, right? So that's another concern about the way this fix is proposed.
Well, and remember that all this doesn't happen, it's not static. The issue is everything's dynamic. When you talk about harms, you have property growth increases, you've got, different student populations. One of the things that's created, I guess, disagreements in what the bill does in terms of the runs from the different, from LBB versus, the groups, the people that do this, in Texas and do it well, is sort of the assumptions and the data they use. Is it 23? Is it 24? Is it this or that? Are we looking forward, looking backward? I mean, all that impacts it, and that's why I think that's what this committee. Our gold standard is, what we will do is produce LBB runs because they kind of call they make the rules. And we had a great meeting a couple mornings ago where we got folks that work on this in a room and said, okay, let's agree on what assumptions we're making so that we can begin to sort of galvanize, the outputs when we make these changes. And I think we'll have better information at that point and information that we can all, be more comfortable with, for sure.
And I'll echo this sentiment. I'm no expert at school finance, but it is always my understanding that an increase in the basic allotment is the rising tide that raises all ships. And so to the extent we want to do right by all students, I do think, I wonder whether if this language hadn't been put in to undo the hold harmless, whether we wouldn't have seen that play out with an increase in the basic allotment, which I want to also echo. I appreciate it going up from the last sub. I think we still need more money in it. Right. One other thing I want to address about this bill, and I promise I'm not a charter school hater. Y'all gave me a bigger boogeyman to fight these last couple of sessions, but I think the increase that they're getting in this bill is way out of whack. And I'll just give you an example. So when we have runs from a group called Moat Casey, right? That's who our school district hires to do this very complicated school finance calculation. And what we see when we look at the runs is that the teacher pay increase from the basic allotment increase of the 40% and the 75% that has to go to teachers, Austin ISD teachers are going to see about a $4,000 increase. KIPP teachers are going to see a $14,000 increase. I don't know how my school district can compete with that. And so I would ask, and by the way I read the bill, I don't know if they're going to spend that money on teacher pay raises because they're not obligated in the same way school districts are. But that's part of the largesse that charters are getting that I would ask that we look at in trying to balance everybody's interests and balance everybody's, what our districts are getting, because that does seem out of whack.
All right. Thank you. I'm sorry, more questions? Oh, I'm sorry, Chairman Dutton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank you and Mr. Vice Chair Banal for working on this. This is always a complicated issue. But one of the things that I want to follow up on, I think it's Mr. Tallarico who raised the issue of the biggest problem in the bill seems to be related to the whole harmless provision. Is that correct?
It's the biggest problem for certain districts, I think. I mean, I don't know for sure that that's causing the problem. I don't know if it's district size, because I know that some of the problems that Representative Bryant, we share that same problem, and you've got a district that probably has, I don't know, 90,000 kids. I don't, you know. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm saying 135,000, and one in my district has 2,000, but we got the output is the same per kid. So that could be the problem, but it's hard for me to square how that issue, you know what I mean, is impacting both districts the same, but it may very well be.
Well, one of the things I was wondering if, I don't want to try this, but could you just succinctly explain the whole harmless and why that is in the bill?
Yeah. Why?
Why we have the whole harmless provision?
Yeah. So anytime when you do compression, maintenance and operation compression, and you have increase in homestead exemptions, then that changes because of a legislative trigger. That changes sort of the mix of funding in a school district. In other words, it is going to decrease the amount that they can raise locally, right? Because the tax rate goes down, the values go down. If you do the math, that creates fewer dollars. And so hold harmlesses are in here, and they've literally been layered in to try to fill the hole if someone, if by doing that compression or those exemptions, that someone takes a haircut in funding. And so that is designed to kind of hold them up, to hold them harmless. The desire is that over time, as you grow, okay, as a district, and the economic and the metrics change about a district, that you begin to grow out of that, and the funding system the school finance system sort of catches up with them. And this was an effort to do that, to step those down, because every time we are literally layering hold harmless after hold harmless after hold harmless, through these efforts to provide tax relief. And so that's what the bill seeks to do. And also, the hold harmless is really inequitable, because it really does pick winners and losers. And so, like I said, when if we look at what the hold harmless is doing, we may find it impacting Houston or Salado significantly, and we may find that it is all along that before, with the hold harmless as is now, might be a detriment to Galveston. It might be a detriment to Northside, and so that's the challenge of that. And that's why we need to get in and work it out and figure out what we can do to get the outcomes that we desire for our districts.
Well, thank you for that explanation, Mr. Chairman. I asked that, because I think there are people, as I've had to explain it to people, they always have this wide eye, and they're trying to figure out, what are y'all talking about hold harmless, and why do you need to do that? Because for the largest school district, HISD, what has upwards of 180, 90,000 students, I think the information we have is that the whole harmless provision is what causes a significant imbalance in the whole funding of House Bill 2. And I suspect that when trying to fix that, as you suggest, fixing it means that some districts are going to be losers and some districts are going to be winners, just by the nature of the whole harmless provision. And when we've done it in the past, that's always been at the top of the list, is how to minimize the losers and doing something about maximizing winners. And I hope, and I'm sure when you're developing this bill further, that will be at the top of the priority list, I hope.
Absolutely, yeah. You have my commitment to that, Chairman Dutton, and I've made that to other members on here. And you know, one of the things that I think we need to keep in mind that as a district, as we try to grow them out of hold harmless, that, you know, that is the process as all this is designed to increase the state share as that happens, so that there's less need to hold them harmless. And so we will work on that, of what that really does, of what the impact of the dollars we're putting into the system will have on those districts to get that right. Let's keep in mind that the basic allotment automatically increases under this bill every 2 years, which is also positive for the school finance system, just in terms of dollars, though it's not always dollar for dollar, as you'll find amongst many districts.
Mr. Chairman?
All right, thank you.
Yeah, Representative Bryant, yes, sir. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
I'd like to provide some clarification. This is not that complicated. In 2023, we passed property tax changes, which, but for the hold harmless language, would have cost our school districts money, because we compressed their tax rates, and we granted a much larger homestead exemption. Okay? And part of the bill then was to guarantee each district that if they lost because of that, the state would make up the difference. That's called hold harmless. We're going to make sure you're not harmed by the passage of the property tax reform bill. Your bill eliminates that protection. It's that simple. And it is not complex, because every district benefits from a hold harmless provision in the law that is being taken out.
But
let me finish.
I'll let you finish.
It's being removed by HB2, by this bill that we're speaking in glowing terms about. Why is that happening is the first question. And I would put that to you. Why are you taking it out?
Because the hold harmless provision to you that is to the tune of $85 million for Dallas, you know, that is often resources that are not available to other school districts. So what holds you harmless harms me. I'm not physically, but you know what I'm saying. That's the point. That's absolutely the point.
You have the same hold harmless protection as Dallas has, as any other district has. We all have the same hold harmless protection. If you're harmed, the state's going to make up the difference so you're not harmed. That's what's in the current law. Your bill today removes that from the current law.
It steps it down over time as districts grow, as they grow out of the harm. That is the intention of that. Because if not, if you continue to provide this baseline and they grow, then the equity between districts begins to expand because of that hold harmless provision.
Well, I would just point out that I will stand on what I've said, and I think it's irrefutably the case. But I would also point out that I know why it was done. It was done so you could provide these lavish increases to charter schools that Representative Hinojosa referenced earlier, and so you could provide that extremely generous increase in the incentive of funding for incentive teacher pay later on. Now,
I mean, the teacher incentive allotment that is built around the system your district of Dallas ISD uses, they are the poster child for merit pay for teachers.
That's
They are
correct.
the biggest fan of teacher incentive allotment. As of yesterday, sat in my office to tell me just how important merit pay and teacher incentive allotment is to Dallas ISD.
well, I think I talked to Dallas ISD more than the chairman. I can tell you what they said is that we don't need, and nobody needs, that much money for the teacher incentive allotment. That's what's excessive here, and the money going to charter schools, and that's why you pulled out the hold harmless language that all districts benefit from to get the money to do that. Now, I don't know.
That is absolutely not true.
Well,
The charter funding is built around the small and mid-size adjustment, and there was not an effort to say let's do this so that we can get the hold harmless.
well,
That is just not
it's
true.
just curious that the $900 million we're talking about, it fits.
It's curious.
both.
It's curious as you would argue against one of the greatest benefits of Dallas ISD, which is merit pay for their teachers and staff. Everybody in Dallas ISD participates.
Well-
This creates enhanced TIA so that everyone on a school campus can benefit from outstanding performance.
Yeah, but it's
And I appreciate Dallas ISD, your home district, for their hard work over the years to be the model of teacher merit pay, and the teacher incentive allotment and the enhancements are good for Dallas. They're good for Salado. They're good for Killeen. And I mean, best of all, they're good for kids.
Mr.
Absolutely
Chairman,
good for kids.
Nobody here is talking about whether TIA is good or bad. The point is that whoever wrote the bill, if it was the chairman or if it was the commissioner of education or whoever else played a role in it, wanted a whole lot more money in the teacher incentive allotment than the school district that does the most of it, Dallas, needs. And the same was the case with the charter schools. And the amount of money put into those is just about the same as the amount of money you've taken away from districts by eliminating the language that made sure that they were not harmed by tax reform. And that's what you've taken out in the bill. And it should not be obfuscated, and we shouldn't be mixing all these terms up. The point is language that was promised to them in 2023 that they would not be harmed by tax reform is being removed by House Bill 2. And that's the problem that these districts have that I've mentioned that are suffering so much.
Well, my commitment to you is, again, will be that we will look at that and we'll look at the impact and to make sure that we get the types of results that impact our districts more fairly from top to bottom, from the biggest to the littlest. You have my word. Dr. Allen.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Just for the record, I want to say that I too think this meeting should have been live streamed. What are we hiding? This is one of the biggest bills that we're going to pass this session between the two bills, and so I think the public should be made aware. With all of the good things that we've talked about today that are in the bill, and some of them are significant, but I cannot in good conscience vote for the bill because there's so many things lacking. First of all, the $8 million, the $1 billion that's going into the bill is not enough. It's simply a Band-Aid, and I know some superintendents may be grateful for anything they get, but it does not significantly increase the amount of money that they need, and it will not put us back to the 2019 budget. So with that in mind, I think the basic allotment, which is now $395, is certainly not enough. That's not enough. Also, I'm concerned about the teachers of 5 years to 10 years getting a raise, but the other teachers are not. And so we are not really, we have said to teachers, you're going to get a raise. And so all of them are expecting a raise, but we're only giving it to a few. And because we're giving it to the 5 to 10, that does not attract new teachers to the profession. So I think we need to at some point think about that. And I know that it's expensive and costly, but it's something that needs to be done. I also would like to see like the pre-K, which is $200 million for all-day pre-K, that makes sure that we put that money in. I remember when we put $250 million in, and then went back and took $250 million out. So I want to make sure that that does not happen again. I want to bring that to your attention. Okay, so with that in mind, and we don't have staff development money. We definitely need that. I know we have that incentive money to go into growing our own teachers, but that's if they're already in the system and they are aides or other positions in the school district, that we take those people and encourage them to become teachers and pay for their tuition or whatever they have to go through. And so, and again, let me talk about uncertified teachers. If you look at the numbers that come out of TEA for the success that the children have made this school year, you're looking at something like 40-some% of all the children passing the tests. Okay, so we can see the harm that has done, and so with that uncertified teachers, we have lost generation of children already. We cannot afford to lose another generation, because this is harming our kids, and we must keep our kids in mind. Not only that, not only this generation, it will harm the next 5 generations before you can get teachers up to snuff and get all certified teachers back into the classroom. Those are some of my concerns, and so with that in mind, I will not be voting for the bill today.
All right, Representative Schoolcraft.
Mr. Chairman, does this bill still have in it the guarantee that every district will get at least $200 additional new money per student?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so when we discuss harm, it sounds to me like it's just a discussion on whether or not someone thinks they're getting enough new money. If they're being harmed if they don't get what they think they should get?
Yes, sir.
Oh, thank you.
Okay. Members, any more questions? All right. Is there objection to the adoption of the committee substitute? Chair hears none. Substitute is adopted. The chair moves that House Bill 2 as substituted be reported favorably to the full House with the recommendation that it do pass and be printed, and the clerk will call the roll.
Chairman Buckley?
Aye.
Vice Chair Bernal?
Yes.
Allen?
No.
Ashby?
Aye.
Bryant?
No.
Cunningham?
Aye.
Dutton?
Aye.
Frank?
Aye.
Hinojosa?
Aye.
Hunter?
Yes.
Kerwin?
Aye.
Leach?
Aye.
Leo Wilson?
Aye.
Schoolcraft?
Aye.
Talarico?
All right. There being 13 ayes and 2 nays, the motion prevails. Chair lays out is, suspending business. The chair lays out SB 2 by Creighton as the companion to HB 3 relating to the establishment of an education savings account program, which was previously heard and left pending. The chair offers a committee substitute. Members, the committee substitute for Senate Bill 2 contains the same ESA program structure outlined in House Bill 3 that we heard on March 11th for more than 21 hours. The committee substitute contains the following changes. The substitute establishes a $1 billion statutory expenditure cap on the ESA program for the first biennium, mirroring the $1 billion appropriation limit in the state budget. It limits the ESA funding for students eligible in Tier 4 to 20% of the program's total budget. and prioritizes students that were previously enrolled in public school over those already enrolled in private schools. This provision expires after the 26-27 school year. The substitute clarifies that students enrolled in private school must be tested in third grade and above. The bill requires that a child may not participate in the program unless the child's parent establishes that the child is a citizen or national of the United States or was lawfully admitted into the United States. If an ESA student chooses to return to a public school during the school year, that student shall be excluded from the accountability system, and the receiving school district will be entitled to an additional 10% of state funding for the remainder of the school year. The committee substitute makes explicit that a participant cannot receive, withdraw cash, or reimbursement, and that a certified education assistance organization cannot charge a fee. Lastly, the bill clarifies that the amount appropriated for purposes of the program must be established by the legislative appropriations process, and it makes various changes suggested by the comptroller for program implementation. Okay, members, with that, are there any questions? Let me move to the next part. Okay, where are we? Where are we? Okay. All right. Any questions? All right, Representative Talarico.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think it's actually very helpful to have these two bills side by side because we just talked about the dire straits that our schools are in. We've got campuses closing all over the state, including in my district, in Dallas, in San Antonio, in El Paso. Communities all over the state are closing campuses. We have teachers who are making less than they did 10 years ago when you adjust for inflation. We have teachers in my district who are driving Ubers at night to make extra money. And local property taxes are through the roof because the state government has not done its fair share of school funding. We are taking a step to fix that, a step. We're not catching us up to 2019 funding levels, but it is progress. But now we're considering a bill that's going to send $1 billion in the first year and perhaps $7 billion in the second biennium to kids who are in private school or kids who are homeschooled, kids who are not even in our public schools currently. And I do not know how we justify this decision. Until our schools are fully funded, until we are out of this school funding emergency, I don't think we should even be entertaining this bill. But since we are, I do have questions. So in terms of changes, in our last hearing on the bill, we established that while the cost of this program starts at $1 billion in the first biennium, LBB forecasts that it will balloon to $7 billion in the second biennium. Is that correct?
That's the LBB fiscal note.
And LBB is what you earlier called the gold standard?
Yeah.
Okay.
It is the metric we use in this body.
Right. So the gold standard, the Legislative Budget Board, the gold standard, says that this bill will grow to $7 billion in the second biennium. Is there anything in this bill that limits that growth?
The bill limits the appropriation during the first biennium to $1 billion, and then the second biennium is literally up to the legislature.
Are you in this new version of the bill mandating that the comptroller's office, who we've charged with administering this program, is mandated to request from the legislature in the second biennium that we cover every child on the wait list and all of their siblings?
That is their request. It does not have to be granted.
But we are mandating that they request that.
Yes, that gives them the guidance of what they are to come to the the appropriative process with that ask, if you will.
In 2011, in the 2011 legislative session, right before I started teaching at San Antonio ISD, Texas was recovering from the Great Recession and cut $5.4 billion from our public schools. I saw firsthand the impacts of those cuts. I saw kids fall through the cracks in front of my eyes because of the decisions that were made in this building. Is there anything in this bill that if we face a recession, that this money that we're sending to wealthy families that are sending their kids to private school will be cut first before we ever touch our public schools?
The appropriation process is in the hands of the legislature, just as it is every session, Representative Talarico.
This is coming from general revenue?
Yes.
and we can use general revenue funds to give to our public schools?
We can use general revenue for whatever purpose the legislature feels is needed.
Including public schools?
Absolutely.
So it's the same pot of money?
No, there is there's not a dollar of property tax money that goes into the ESA program. It is all money that's in the general revenue.
All money, it's all money that's in the general revenue?
Yes.
So it's all money in the same pot?
Yeah, but the school fund, permanent school fund, and all, and
I'm not asking
the
about
available
permanent
school fund, but the available school fund is not part of general revenue.
Yep, but we can use general revenue funds for public schools?
We can use general revenue funds for anything, and if you look in the current state budget, we're using it for about 10,000 things.
Could we spend the $1 billion appropriated for subsidizing private school tuition for kids in private school, or the $7 billion that it's forecasted to grow to in the second biennium? Could we use that money to help our public schools?
If the legislature appropriates it and the governor signs it, we can. That is what this body is for.
Okay. In our conversations, you mentioned the concern that was brought up multiple times in the hearing on this bill that the money will go to wealthier families in the state. We talked about how in every state that's tried vouchers, the money is disproportionately helping wealthier families rather than low-income families, because wealthier families already have their kids in private school, and so they've cleared that first big hurdle. And there is no limit on who's eligible. We don't limit this to low-income families. We don't limit this to middle-class families. It is literally open to anyone. And to get the funds, you have to be admitted to the private school. So because of those structural barriers, these programs, when implemented in other states, tend to help wealthier families. You heard that, and I appreciated that, and you put a 20% limit on the rich parents who could get these funds. Is that correct?
Yes, that is in the committee substitute, which is before the committee today.
And that 20% limit expires after the first year?
That is correct.
So after the first year, there will be no limit on how many wealthy parents can access these funds?
Well, it would be limited by the amount of money the legislature chooses to appropriate for the program.
Okay.
That would limit everyone, by the way.
So millionaire households, even billionaire households, could apply for these funds and would be eligible for these funds?
Anyone can apply. In the first class, if you will, of students that could receive it. If you earn greater, if you're a regular education student and you earn, your family earns more than $160,000 a year, the total appropriation in there is limited, or the total participants are limited to 20% of the appropriation.
In the first year?
Yes, sir. In the first biennium. Yes,
yeah.
sir.
You've seen that Elon Musk has tweeted his support for this bill?
I have not.
He tweeted out that he wants the Texas legislature to pass this bill. Elon Musk is a Texas resident, so would he theoretically be eligible to apply for these funds?
I'm guessing he's probably priority number 4.
But he would be eligible?
Yes.
It was just announced that Elon has fathered his 14th child. I looked into this. 8 of them are under school age.
Elon Musk is not in the committee substitute, but you can keep asking.
So I just want to use this as a thought experiment. So let's say he gets a voucher for each of those 8 children. That's over $80,000 a year in taxpayer funds, more than what most teachers make. And so if you sent them to a private school from pre-K to senior year, that's a total of $1.2 million in taxpayer funds for Elon Musk, theoretically.
No, or it's, $15,000 to a working family in Killeen, Texas at Oak Creek who are struggling to keep their kids there who have special needs. I mean, anyone's eligible.
And we
can use it, and with all respect, we can use extremes, and Elon Musk is an easy punching bag for lots of reasons. But the reality is that in all seriousness, there are many families that either have kids in public school or those struggling with kids in private school right now that will benefit from this bill.
Mr. Chairman, I'm being deadly serious. If we wanted to help that family in Killeen, we could limit this program to that family, to working class parents across the state, could we not?
The legislature can do what we want to do.
But sir,
I'll
Mr.
tell you
Chairman,
what,
you're the author of this bill.
Yeah, I
you
am.
could you could limit it to middle class and working class families if you wanted to, but you are allowing, I know Elon Musk is a somewhat humorous example, but wealthy parents, whether they're as much as whether they're the richest man in the world or whether they're just a family making over $500,000 a year, they have access to this program. So it is not limited to that family that you just mentioned, a working class family in Killeen.
Well, you know, Elon Musk could send his kids to public school as well,
And
as
so
many millionaires and billionaires do.
right, and we all pay for our public schools so they can be free to everyone, and they are accountable to the taxpayer.
And the families,
these schools,
Mr. Tallarico, the families at Tallarico, a corporal in the Army and a mother who works fast food are paying their property taxes like everybody else, paying for public schools, but found that a private setting was a better setting for their children. And so the argument to me just falls flat that only people with kids in school are paying for public schools, and somehow if you're not, we all do that, and we all do it with the good in mind of that.
So-
my kids all went to public school.
Mr. Chairman,
and I continue to pay my property taxes with no kids in school.
we all pay for our public highways, correct?
Absolutely.
Can I take from the tech stop budget to repave my driveway?
I don't believe so. You're not authorized by law to do so.
Right. The point is, some things we do together and some things we do on our own. No one is preventing a family from sending their kids to private school.
Yes, their individual circumstance does sometimes, Mr. Tallarico.
But no one here is making
Their circumstance, their financial circumstance, actually their address does that.
But no one here
address
is-
where they can live, Mr. Tallarico.
Mr. Chairman, is
That's
anyone
what
here
limits
making
that.
it illegal for a family to send their child to a private school?
I'm sorry?
Is anyone here trying to make it illegal for a family to send their child to a private school?
No, but what we're trying to do is to give parents more tools in their toolbox, because raising kids and educating kids is difficult. It's very complicated. And what it looks like for me, it may not look like the same way for you. It might look not the same way for Mr. Cunningham. I mean, this body cannot contemplate the circumstance that some children are placed. And this is just another option for parents.
But Mr. Chairman, respectfully, if our goal was to help the families you just mentioned that are limited by income, we could do that in this bill. We could limit it to families who need extra help, but we're not doing that. And so then my concern is, when you look at Florida, 70% of the users of their voucher program were people who already had their kids in private school. In Arkansas, it was 95%. And so my concern is that if this plays out like I think it will, you're actually going to be taking the tax dollars of plumbers and nurses and working people, and you're going to be subsidizing the tuition of wealthy families who already have their kids at St. John's, St. Mark's, St. Stephen's. So that is a transfer of wealth from the bottom to the top. I know the rhetoric around this bill is around helping working class people or helping poor kids, but your bill does not match the rhetoric. Your bill is opening the door to some of the wealthiest people in the state taking taxpayer funds to do something they're paying for anyway. And so I just, in good conscience, of course, can't support that kind of policy. And I think it would be a wise decision by this committee and by the Texas House to limit this to the students that you say you want to help. And if that is true, then you can do that in your bill. And you've made a decision not to. And in fact, you've made a decision to remove that limit in the first biennium.
But Mr. Tallarico, I don't presume to be the one that ought to be judge and jury on other people's children.
Do you think that's what I'm saying, Mr. Chairman?
I do not. No, I do not know.
Okay, then don't.
I do not
then
know
let's not.
No, I'm just saying I don't know the circumstance of every family, and I don't know their tax returns, and I don't know the particular challenges a child is having.
Sure.
But what I do know is that when you put choice in the hands of parents, they will make the right call. And I think that the circumstance in which they will make that will look different from family to family. And that's I know that's what this bill does.
And currently in Texas, a parent can choose between their neighborhood school, a public charter school, magnet school, early college high school, career and technical school, academies, there is school choice in Texas, and all of those options that I mentioned are accountable to the taxpayer. That's why they get taxpayer funds. Taxation with representation. We fought a revolution over this. And so my point is that to then open this up to private schools that are unaccountable to the taxpayer, they don't have to follow any of the same rules. They don't have to accept the same students. They don't have to take the same test. To open it up to unaccountable private schools that aren't accountable to the taxpayer doesn't protect all of us who pay for public schools. We want parents to have options. You know that I've been a big proponent of more options for parents. We have a program currently that allows, if your child is in a school that's struggling academically, to transfer to a different public school. We have that in law. And I'm for even more options. If this committee wants to get together and figure out more options for parents, I'm all here. What I want to caution us against is taking away tax dollars from those real choice options and giving it to an unaccountable system that is going to primarily serve the wealthy few. That is the problem here. And so I resent the effort to use parents or use choice to pass a bill that will help the wealthiest families in the state at the expense of working class kids all over Texas.
Well, I resent the fact that your address should dictate the quality of education that
I
you
do too,
receive.
Mr. Chairman. That's why
Well, then you're saying then that's not real choice, Mr. Tallarico.
So how does
really good choice for I know. Okay, I apologize.
No, go ahead,
Fine.
Mr. Chairman.
No, what I'm telling you is this: is we know when we look at the outcomes that we see in our school districts across Texas, it's not difficult to know which districts are going to do well. But there are struggling parents in those districts. There are struggling parents in districts and from families that are certainly not as fortunate as you or I are in terms of our economic status. And all this does is doesn't make anybody do anything. It simply provides a choice. Nobody, if it were to be, there could be 0 applicants for this. But if a parent believes that this is the best opportunity for their child to receive what they need, and with 3 very unique children and having faced those moments before, I wholeheartedly understand that type of decision a parent needs to make or that they have to make, and this is simply an option for them to do so.
And you know that I taught in one of the poorest zip codes in the state, in a struggling public school that didn't have enough desks for all the kids in my classroom. And instead of giving $1 billion, $7 billion in the second biennium to that school to help kids who need help urgently, we're going to be allowing the wealthy families in the state to use this precious taxpayer money. So, of course, I think there are too many inequalities, too many disparities in our system. That's why I'm here in the legislature. That's why I'm on this committee, to solve that. I work with the other members of this committee to address that. My problem is that this bill is going to make those problems worse, not better. It's taking money that could be going to those struggling public schools that desperately need the funds, and it's going to be shipping that money off to families who don't need it, who are already paying for their private school tuition. And I just think that is a deeply, deeply immoral decision. And I urge this body and this committee to make a different choice and to use this precious taxpayer dollars to help our neighborhood public schools that need it. Because every budget decision is a choice. I know some of us want to say, oh, we can do both. We have limited funds in this state. And if every dollar that we send to a family who's already got their kid in private school is a dollar that's not going to our public schools. And the bill we just heard, although it makes good progress, doesn't even catch our schools up to 2019 funding levels. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Members, any more questions? Representative Hinojosa.
I don't know why we wasted so much time on this issue when 5.5 million school kids in this state have a right to public schools, attend public schools, and it is the only option for all Texas students. Our focus should be on investing in what is the right of every student in the state of Texas and not creating this lifeboat for people to leave the system, just a certain few, just a chosen few, when there's so much work to do in our ISDs. We heard from even the witnesses who were here in support of the voucher of no statewide program for a taxpayer-funded voucher where achievement improved. In fact, not for a statewide voucher, unless they could discriminate against the students who they accepted, which just should not be an option with public dollars. In fact, we heard that all of the studies show, and we heard from an expert here who used to be a proponent of vouchers, who said all of the studies show learning loss, catastrophic learning loss associated with vouchers on par with COVID. It's historic learning loss. This bill increases the demands on the taxpayer because they have to fund a whole now new lane of schools. And in fact, we are saying that after this next year cap expires, they could be on the hook for the private school tuition of every child currently in private school. And really, it's those kids who are most likely to get the voucher, because the first hurdle to overcome to get into the taxpayer-funded voucher program is to be accepted to the private school, right? So you can prioritize all you want. If a kid can't get in because they can't pay the rest of the tuition, because they have a disciplinary record, because they just are not the right fit, because they're not the right religion, because they are disabled, because this bill expands the opportunity to discriminate against our kids who need a special education and who are disabled.
Ms. Inhofe, please address the committee substitute.
Okay, well, this is all in the committee substitute. It increases recapture on my district, and I don't see a way we pass this bill and not make TRS actuarially unsound. And I will say, we asked to question Mr. Guthrie from the TRS about this bill, and we have not been given that opportunity. We have serious concerns and questions with the impact that this has on TRS at a time when we struggle to attract and retain quality teachers in our classroom. It scares me that this is going to make matters worse. And there's something in particular about this bill that I just think adds insult to injury. And it's on page 22. On page 22, line 19, this says, right, because we know that what the fiscal note says, this voucher will be $11,000. A student who gets this voucher will get $11,693, because that is 85% of the estimated statewide average, which is on page 21. By 2030, it will be $12,282. If we increase student funding for our ISDs and charters this session, it will be more than that, by the way, right? Because this is based on current funding. This number is based on current funding. But this estimated statewide average includes the amount the state is required to contribute to the teacher retirement system of Texas. So it creates this never-ending loop, right? We grow the program that subtracts from TRS, teachers paying into the program, and then we have to factor in the part that the state has to put back in to the system to make it sound, and then that grows the program. It's this never-ending loop that is nuts. I think it makes no sense. I want to bring our attention to some other just real basic problems in this bill, even for people who might be supporters of this policy. On page 23, bless you. On page 23, there is a provision, line 21, begins on line 21, and this is supposed to be the hold harmless for school districts, that if a child comes back from a voucher program, comes back from the private school, that the school district gets made whole. My understanding is, and we've talked about this, I want to bring it up here so that we remember to work on this, because all this says is that if a student goes back, the district is entitled to an allotment of the basic allotment multiplied 0.1. And this is notwithstanding any other law. So that comes out to, I think, $622,
Yeah.
which is a decrease.
Plus the basic allotment.
Okay. I appreciate that that's your intent.
If, when HB2 is in effect, it would be, what, it'd be $7,400, plus whatever weighted funding the student receives given their circumstance.
I appreciate that that's your intent. I don't see where it says that in the bill. And so I would ask that be addressed. I want to say one more thing about the hold harmless. The hold harmless tells school districts that that child is not subject to their accountability rating scores for the first year after the child ceases participation in the program. I think that needs to be at least 2 years to undo the harm that will be done by catastrophic learning loss. I'll say I'm disappointed that still we will be using these taxpayer dollars to market a program that is competition against our ISDs. We don't use state dollars to market for our public schools. I wish we did. I wish we had a San Antonio-style Go Public campaign for Texas public schools. That would be pretty awesome, and I think that money would be better spent there. So I regret that that is still in there. And on page 13, it deals with assessment. And I want to talk about this too, because this is an issue that is close to the hearts of many parents, and me in particular, because in the name of accountability, my child is subject to the STAR test because his education is paid for with taxpayer dollars. These kids, who are probably, most of them, already in private school, won't have to be subject to the accountability my son is subject to. A system that I have spoken about before, that when my son was in second grade tried to run away from the school because they were doing STAR test practice, and it was too much for him. We will never get this test off the backs of our public school students if we have a test for the haves and the test for the have-nots. And so I take great offense to the fact that we would not require the exact same test of these students who use taxpayer dollars for their education. I want to say one more thing about that. We just received word that the lawsuit that so many school districts brought against TEA on the accountability system has been ruled in TEA's favor by a court that is appointed entirely by Greg Abbott.
Let's sound the bill, please.
The system feels rigged, and we shouldn't be contributing to that. So I would ask that we look at how that is equitable for our students and do a better job there. There's another issue that I don't understand, and it seems like the bill is in contradiction of itself. On page 31, this says the state agency may not adopt a rule or take other action related to the program that limits an education service provider, vendor, or program participant. The program participant is the student as defined in this bill, from freely determining methods or curriculum. So here we say the state agency cannot get involved with what curriculum and what methods students use with this taxpayer-funded voucher. Earlier in the bill, though, for homeschoolers, we we say, well, earlier in the bill, we have TEA has to approve all this stuff and the comptroller too. So I would ask that we look at that. I know it's a big concern of the homeschoolers, of which I have many in my district, by the way, that there would be these kinds of strings attached. So I think that's inconsistent. I don't think that's true in the bill if the other part of the bill remains. And, you know, at a time, look, I ran for office. I ran for the Texas House also because of school funding. I was on the school board. I figured out, oh, guess what? The money decisions of not having enough money to get made here. That's why my son's school is threatened for closure. We had a meeting in our school district last week talking about more school closures. And when you look at a bill that is projected to take billions and billions of more, billion this biennium that we could use on our public school students and billions more in the future when our schools are so far behind and school districts are having to make tough decisions of closing schools, this just makes no sense.
Thank you, Representative. I think you summed up in one of your first sentences what I believe about this bill. You described it as a lifeboat. I've never seen anyone jump off of a perfectly good boat, especially for their kids. And so I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but I mean that's the way that I look at it.
Except the ship is sinking that has all the other kids in it. That is the problem.
I don't know about that. Thank you. Representative Leo Wilson.
I just wanted to ask a couple questions. I remember TRS was here, and I remember that Brian Guthrie corrected the record that had been out there in the papers, and he even corrected it in the Texas Tribune, stating that school choice will not harm TRS, and that the portion that they were looking at was the teacher pay increase, and that in the future that could be a problem if we didn't look at that as a legislature, maybe, you know, in the future for stabilizing and making it actuarially sound.
That is correct. There was no significant actuarial impact from the bill before the committee on the teacher retirement system. All right.
Okay.
Any other?
And then one
more
other
questions?
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. Do you have more questions?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then one other thing that I wanted to make sure that we're looking at is, you know, we have an advantage in looking at the 32 other states that have school choice. And so when we're looking at that, I think it's important, Mr. Chairman, that we don't just look at programs for that first year program expansion and look at the income levels that are in that first year level expansion, because wouldn't you say that clearly parents that are already using some form of school choice have that information, and as that information spreads, it's important to look at the whole picture, not just a little narrow, here's who's in the program for first year expansion. And the reason I'm saying that is when you look at the whole scope of it, 82% of the Arizona ESA participants have an income less than $150,000 per year. So every year that those programs have grown in other states, that takes in more and more of those low-income students as they become more informed that there are options. Same thing with Indiana. 75% of those have families with less than 150. So I think it's important to look at the whole scope and not just a couple of programs on what happened during that first year of expansion. Don't you?
Yeah. Again, yes, I think the bill speaks to that. That is the data as we have it across the country. And I do want every member to keep the commentary towards the committee sub that's before. This is a formal meeting about this bill, so let's keep it all directed towards that. Any more questions?
I do have.
Okay. About the committee sub.
Mr. Chairman.
No, sir.
Well, the committee sub, and when we're talking about appropriations and how much does this increase? I know we spend 96 billion overall on pub ed. How much of a portion of this increase would this bill be for pub ed?
I'm sorry.
So how I read this is.
It's one, the bill spends $1 billion.
Okay. So, I guess what I'm frustrated with is when we look at the general fund, as Mr. Tallarico was pointing out, we are appropriators and we have to look at the whole balance of things. So when I'm looking at that, every time you take something away from the grid, it takes away from maybe general fund dollars that you could spend in public ed. Every time you spend on something else, on TxDOT, you're taking money away from something you could spend on the grid. So I guess I get frustrated that this is somehow taking money away because it's not taking anything away from the permanent school fund, correct? It's not taking any money out of the school
correct.
foundation program.
That is correct. It's $1 billion general revenue.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Chair recognizes Dr. Allen for a question.
Thank you. This bill, this voucher bill, will eventually destroy public schools. I give it 10 years, 5 sessions from now. Once you open that box, many of these will pop up and it will eventually destroy public schools. There are not enough private schools to absorb all the children that are in the public school system. There are not public schools out there with seats that are waiting for public schools children to come to occupy. So that simply means all of the children will not have an opportunity to go to a private school. But private schools do not have to take all of the children. Public schools must take everybody who comes to the door. You must take them in and you must do the best you can to educate them. And so, with public schools, right now, out there in the private schools, you'll see pop-up schools coming, and they are waiting on this voucher bill to pass. You're going to see all kind of pop-up schools, mom-and-pop schools, schools under the tree, schools everywhere.
Dr. Allen, the bill
Yes.
requires that the schools be accredited, and that's a process, and it's in the bill. There will not be pop-up schools.
Pop-up accredited schools. We have lots of pop-up accredited schools. Okay, let's go to those that are accredited now if they're not pop-up under the tree. But if we go to, and I don't want to say that, schools that have tuition under $1,000 are now raising their tuition in anticipation of this bill passing so that they can absorb the whole $10,000. That's happening, all right? And so that's another avenue for money coming out of public schools. Private schools are now accountable in terms, and you've heard that already, and I was trying not to say anything more, the same thing that Gina said, or that anyone else has said already. I'm just pointing out some things that really are going to harm public schools. And so, and with that in mind, nobody who is in public schools and you don't have transportation to get there into the public schools, you're not going to be able to go across town. You have 2 or 3 kids, you can't take them to different schools everywhere. And I know you're going to tell me about to take a taxi bill and take a Uber and all of that kind of stuff, but there's no transportation for these kids. So it makes it really difficult. In other words, you see that this is really not for all children. And if we're going to help the kids who are in schools that are not servicing them well, we need to invest in public schools too, just like we're investing in vouchers for children to go everywhere. When vouchers come, we kill neighborhood schools, schools are closing down right now. Programs are being eliminated in schools. This is going to be a detriment to all public schools. And so with that in mind, I don't know anything you can do to fix a bill that convinces me to vote for vouchers. That's going to destroy the schools of the future, will destroy my children, my grandchildren, my great-grandchildren. So I have to think long range before I vote for something that's going to take that out of it. I grew up in a segregated time where we went to, my mother taught in a one-room schoolhouse, and she taught all the kids in the neighborhood. And I remember desks that had carvings in them, and I remember school books that had a student's name already. I remember not having a bus to take us to the school, and so somebody there was a gentleman in the neighborhood who had a truck, and they just put a bed on it, and that's how we got to school. So when I finished high school, there was nowhere for us to go. So I remember those times, and we're on our way back there, just not educating kids. So with that in mind, I will not be voting for the voucher bill.
Chairman Frank.
Thank you, Chairman. Just had a quick clarification and a question. First, I love the committee substitute. I appreciate in the initial bill there was prioritization, clear prioritization based on income, so that literally those who have less will be first come, first served, or will be first served. Also appreciate the addition in the committee sub of the cap to make sure that really we will do everything we can to make sure that those who want access to this can get it. And so that's just a comment. Another second comment, and I promise I will have a question. We talked about the professor and what the professor said from Michigan that came down that was against, they are not vouchers. This is not a voucher bill. It's an ESA. But he said here several times that the studies all show that public school improvement, academic performance improves. Then he went at length talking about, well, it's not huge, but I said, but it does improve. So the academic performance, that's what he said, and he was the one that was testifying against it. So the idea that things are going to completely fall apart, I understand if people don't like the bill, but the idea that this is going to destroy public schools is, to me, fear-mongering. So question I have is, does your bill and the committee sub, does it give parents, in the rare cases where a public school is not serving their needs, and honestly the very best of public schools sometimes don't fit 1 or 2% of kids for whatever reason, sometimes it's the kids' fault, does this give them options that don't currently exist?
Absolutely.
Is it prioritized based on income?
Yes.
Thank you.
Chairman Dutton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I asked this question for several reasons, but when a child gets from public school gets a voucher to go to private school, do they become private school students or public school students?
They are private school students with certain, I would say, requirements that they have to be part of the program, because there's a selection process, eligibility process for students.
So they're no longer, their status is no longer a public school student.
They're no longer enrolled in a Texas public school.
Well, you used the term enrolled, and I guess I was trying to figure out from a legal status, because we make several references in the public schools code to public school students. And I'm wondering to what extent, does that change their legal status when they get a voucher and change them from public school student to a private school student?
I'm not sure I understand the question completely, but I believe it only changes really the location of where they receive their education.
Okay, and
Is that,
well, I'm just trying to be sure that the way we attribute certain rights to public school students, will they be extended to those students who get a voucher And is their status changed to private school students simply because they got the voucher, but since the voucher is really public money, how does that affect their status, their legal status?
Well, they're afforded the same rights that every American is in terms of their personal liberties and rights. I would say that one of the concerns against folks that are, let's say, not for this bill is that the IDEA protections or that status that we have in our public schools because of all the federal regulation. The bill clearly states that the parent is made aware of that, but then that parent makes that decision when they join that private school that they are not in a public school, but that is not mutually exclusive of the delivery of great services for those students. It is simply done in a different setting, where in the public setting, it's sort of a partnership between school and federal government and state government and the parent, where when you're really at the private school level, I believe you have the school and the parent that are primarily involved, and of course the student.
Right. Well, it's from a legal standpoint, I was just trying to balance whether or not, to what extent that has changed. But let me ask another question. And it's in response to Chairman Frank, there's a designation based on money, based on how much a family makes in terms of the availability of.
Yes, sir.
Why do we do that?
Sorry?
Why do we do that?
Well, we try to set up a priority schedule that provides opportunities to children that we know have typically struggled more with their academic outcomes. And we arrange those in a way that I think people agree that as we put people in line for the program, that's basically the way we line them up.
And so we recognize, though, by doing that family income levels play a part in access to the voucher.
Yeah, they are. The lower income is basically is a different spot in the line than upper income. However, we prioritize an income level and special needs students before children with special needs. Excuse me, without special needs based on their income.
So the lower income. So this is really designed primarily for lower income students.
Yeah, income level is it's special education students with a certain income level, then regular ed kids of a certain income level, then it progresses up in higher level as we go up the chain of prioritization. But yes, sir, it is prioritized in a way that we believe will match the needs of families, but it also doesn't assume that other families don't have significant concerns with their children as well.
And finally, Mr. Chairman, one of the things that has bothered me about this, and we do this almost in every hearing we have, and I don't care what committee it is, we generally have to try to listen to all the stakeholders. And the one stakeholder missing from this hearing were the private schools themselves. We did have a person testifying on behalf of the association and all that, but I'm thinking of the private schools themselves, and I would love to, and I think all of us would have benefited from hearing directly from them.
We did. I mean, we had testimony from the Catholic schools and from the private school association, but also a superintendent of a private school from San Marcos was here, as well as some other folks that were here that actually worked. Were working in private schools as we speak today.
Well, I guess I was thinking of some of the private schools that I particularly know in Harris County, for example. It would have been great to hear how they're going to respond to this and whether or not they're going to be acknowledging our priority list, for example. and whether they'll even pay attention to it or whether they won't, and whether or not we're actually offering the kind of resources they would be looking at in terms of getting some of these students. Because I fear that what we're designing is not what they're looking at. And I'd like for us to have known that before we make the choice on how we do this, because, and I know, I recognize that the votes are there to perhaps do this, but I think our commitment is we ought to make sure that it's done properly. And that's the only.
Yeah, well, yeah,
comment I make.
Mr. Chairman, I think from the Catholic School Association, the bishops that were here, I recall you working the room a little bit to try to get some of those schools reopened in your district.
Well,
and I don't know if you were successful or not. I hadn't seen the flyer yet.
Well, when I asked, when I asked him, Mr. Chairman, about if I voted for this bill, will they reopen the 2 schools in my district?
Sir, I will not ever put words in your mouth, but I'm not sure that's what you asked.
Well, I did. That's what I asked.
Well, he said it, not me.
That's what I asked, and I think we all heard their answer too. So anyway, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Chairman Dutton. Yeah. All right. Chair recognizes Representative Bryant.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, how many students will leave public schools for private schools if we pass HB 3?
I don't think we know. I mean, I think because nobody has to.
You haven't looked at the larger states that have done this?
I've looked at most states. If you look at mature programs over time, you would have possibly in Florida, maybe it's, I don't know, 7-8% of the total. I mean, that's after 20-something years of having school choice. But I think you kind of see a consistency across the country. But I think in Texas that remains to be seen, because parents will ultimately decide, and parents will make all kinds of decisions.
Well, how many students will leave public schools for homeschooling?
I don't know how many. Again, that's a decision the parent will make.
Well, if you don't have any real idea about it, then the question occurs, where did you come up with the amount of money in the bill?
Well, the amount is the decision of the legislature to start a program, to give access, to give enough access to try to meet the needs of students. We anticipate that there are needs, and there are students that will leave. Some will leave public school, some will become homeschool students, and that's we will have to see what that is.
Well, you're the author of the bill, and presumably when you put a large sum of money in a bill like this, it's based upon recognition of a certain need based on people who have expressed a desire to leave public school and go into private schools, or based upon the experience in other states. And you don't have an estimate.
Well, I mean, there's an estimate that you'll have this program could probably fund in the end, I guess technically 100,000 kids, maybe 80,000, depending on, which children they are and which children choose. What I do know, as the author of the bill, that what informed me about the need was something very personal and very much at home. And that was a children that I know that had struggled with special needs, and they had moved from public school to private school, or in the process of doing it, or were struggling in public schools. And that's where I became what informed me about my decisions on this issue overall.
Well, that may inform your decision about the issue overall, but I'm asking about where you came up with an estimate of how many people will utilize this process, and therefore how much money we need to put into it. And I'm hearing you say, well, you don't really know or really have any idea how many people would want to utilize this.
Well, we do know that with the money there, that it will not exceed the amount of money appropriated.
But that's not an answer to my question. I can do the math, and I can divide 10,000 into a billion and come up with 100,000. I'm asking, did you do any calculation with regard to how many students need this program before you?
Maybe 1 to 1.5% would be an uptake rate to start, I would think.
And what's that based on? Is that some experience or?
No, it's based on looking at programs across the country. It's looking, everybody sort of implements in a different way, and so that changes it, but that's sort of the overall.
Okay, in 2023, you introduced a similar bill, but it was only $500 million. It wasn't $1 billion. So what happened to cause you to increase it from $500 million to $1 billion?
That was the appropriation that is in the budget, and that's what has been designated by the legislature. That will be before the Texas House here next week.
No, you're the author of the bill, and you designated the amount of money in the bill. And in 2023, you designated $500 million. 2 years later, you designated $1 billion. Did your study indicate that twice as many kids wanted to access this as in 2023?
Yeah. I believe it reflects what we believe will be the demand for the opportunity, though we will not know for certain until we see the program stood up and begin to function.
So it's really not based upon any kind of calculation as need. It's just a figure, right? It's not based upon the fact that you studied or had somebody else study other districts, other states to see what happened, or something unique about our state to be able to estimate how many kids need this in order to move from public schools to private schools.
I think you have seen historically what has happened in other states as percentages, and I think that you will likely see Texas parents sort of operate under that same level of participation, or they may not.
Are you aware that the Legislative Budget Board has indicated that estimated that 65% of all the students that leave public schools, that access the voucher will be people who are already in private schools? Are you aware of that Legislative Budget Board?
That is their information they provide.
So you are aware of it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this bill is going to pay for the education in private school of, if your estimate is right, well, let's just take their estimate. This bill then is going to pay for kids who are already in private school to continue in private school. It's going to subsidize their tuition. And in fact, 2/3 of them are already in private school. Is that correct?
It is. It will depend on who applies. LBB has their estimate, but it is an estimate.
Well, do you agree with their estimate?
I'm not certain. I know that there are folks at Oak Creek Academy in Killeen that will apply. I mean, I know that, and folks at St. Joseph's in Killeen Catholic School.
If I proposed $1 billion for public schools in an amendment to one of your bills, wouldn't you ask me to justify that figure and explain why it is needed? You would ask me to justify that. And I'm asking you to justify this figure in your bill today.
Because this bill creates an opportunity. As was said from this dais, a lifeboat. And we don't know how many are going to jump on the lifeboat. And for those families, some of those have made that decision to be in private school already, and others may be in public school. Others may choose homeschool. We will see, and we have an amount of funding that is derived, so we know the amount that a child will generally get, depending on their special needs status or not, and that will sort of guide that sort of guides our view of how many kids could be in the program. But in the end of the day, we will have to see how many children choose to participate.
Now, what proportion of the children that choose to participate are the parents?
The parents choose, yes.
They'll choose, but what proportion of the children that benefit from your proposal would be private schoolers, and what what percentage would be homeschoolers?
I think LBB has some determination of that, what they think, but I don't think we know for sure what that mix of students will be.
Do you acknowledge the teacher retirement system's consultant estimate that for every 10 children that leave the public schools, one teacher or other educational professional will also leave?
I saw that. I don't believe TRS agreed with that assessment.
Well, TRS testified to that in front of the Pensions Committee. I was present.
TRS indicated that there would be no significant impact from this bill on the TRS system. They have more concerns about other bills than they on the TRS system than this.
And TRS's consultant already stated, this is called, their name is GRS, their outside consultant, stated in their letter of February the 3rd that the teacher retirement system is already not in compliance with normal actuarial standards. It is in compliance with an artificial state standard of 31 years of amortization, but it's not in compliance with actuarial standards. Any change in the number of people that are contributing to the teacher retirement system will make it further out of compliance with actuarial standards. Isn't that logical?
It's also logical that increasing teacher pay will make them further out of compliance. Both those things are true.
I don't understand how that could be, because their contribution would go up if you raise their pay.
Well, also their benefits go up, and that's a larger percent impact on actuarial soundness or years, a number of years, than the bill before us today.
Let's suppose no homeschoolers got involved in it, because they're getting about $2,000, I believe.
Yes, sir.
And it's only 100,000 private schoolers. In other words, we divide $10,000 into a billion, and that comes out to 100,000 people that utilized a $10,000 voucher. And 100,000 students leave the public school system and go to private schools. That would mean that 10,000 teachers or other educational professionals also left the system, wouldn't it?
That's a hypothetical that
That's-
has not been borne out in any other state, that 100% of the students that left public schools to go to a private school. I have more faith in our public schools than that. That many parents would choose to leave.
Well, then the figure of $1 billion is too high, isn't it?
I'm sorry?
You put $1 billion in here and you've offered a $10,000 voucher, that means 100,000 kids.
Well,
can
not
access it.
necessarily, because you have special needs kids that can generate up to 30,000, and that can impact it, and we don't know their individual, needs of, or what they will need, or what that exact amount will be.
So you
But
don't have,
there'll be a number of students, a mixed first class, those that initially receive it, that will be some from public school, some currently in private, and some families from homeschools.
and you don't have any idea how it's going to come out.
All I know is we will not spend more than $1 billion. That is absolutely a cap.
That's just in the first biennium, isn't that correct?
That is the first, and then after that, this legislature can appropriate $1 billion again, or they can appropriate $0. It is in the hands of the legislature every biennium.
Well, since no doubt we all want to protect the teacher retirement system, would you accept an amendment that would hold the teacher retirement system harmless from the effects of this bill? That is to say, if we lose contributors to the teacher retirement system, that the legislature will put more money into it in order to protect the teacher retirement system from being out of sync.
That is a question for maybe the other committee you serve on.
No,
pensions.
it would be an amendment to this bill to provide that the teacher retirement system cannot be made actuarially unsound by giving $1 billion away to private school students.
Yeah. There will be ample opportunity to offer amendments on this bill as this bill moves forward.
Would you accept that kind of an amendment?
I will look at all amendments, but I do not know the impact. I don't know from my visits with TRS in my office and their association and their people showed a level of concern for this bill that was not significant. Regardless of GRC or whoever, that was not what was communicated to me, because I asked them directly. And they were more concerned about teacher pay raises and the impact than they were about this bill.
Well, I'll just say that we have to work with objective data, and the consultant to TRS told us that for every 10 children that leave the public schools and go to private schools, we lose one teacher or other educational professional, which means we lose one teacher or educational professional who is contributing to the teacher retirement system. And if you have 100,000 people sign up for this bill, and you surely are expecting that, or you wouldn't put $1 billion in here, we're going to lose 10,000 teachers or other educational professionals that will no longer be contributing to the teacher retirement system. No actuary would ever say he would not be concerned about that.
Well, that was exactly what was given to me by TRS.
Thank you.
Chair recognizes Chairman Ashby.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First off, I want to publicly thank you for working with myself and I'm sure other committee members in drafting the committee substitute. In particular, there's 2 or 3 things there that, as you know, we talked about. And anyway, I appreciate you putting those in there. I think it strengthens the bill. However, as you know, I also think that there are some what I would consider common sense measures that could be incorporated in this bill should it move forward today that do things like, generally speaking, improve accountability, further strengthen taxpayer protections through this program, address the imbalance, as you heard my superintendent testify, in terms of the imbalance between our public school and our private school, the ESA participants, and I appreciate the work you're doing, and I know what you're doing to address that specifically with norm reference tests in replacing STAR, and so I'm cautiously optimistic on what you're doing on that front, but I do think that's something that, as Representative Hinojosa spoke to earlier, I do think that's something that we need to be mindful of. And then lastly, personally, I think that, with a program like this and looking at the taxpayer commitment, I do think that it would stand to reason that we look at a review process, a formal review process, or a sunset review process in 4 or 6 years by a future legislature to really look at the impact of this program across the spectrum in our private schools, our public schools, look at effectiveness, and really, and I know you love to talk about what is the impact on kids. And so I guess my question, which is a very simple one, is just like you did on the prior bill, I just would like to hear you publicly express your continued interest in working with myself and other committee members as if this process does move forward today, as we get towards the floor and looking at amendments or perfecting amendment by the bill author, that you will continue to work with us to improve this bill and strengthen it.
Absolutely. I mean, this is obviously, I would say, a more contentious bill than the last one. There's disagreements on here, and there are things that I believe that this policy that some on this dais would never vote for, and I respect that. But I will always, I believe this position requires someone to always listen to ideas. There are things in the committee sub today that, or things that you and I talked about. There are things that Mr. Tallarico and I talked about. And, and there's some things that Chairman Frank and I talked about. So that part does work, and it will continue to work. And you have my commitment to continue to work on this issue.
Thank you. And I just said, I appreciate you, Sam, because, we've heard a lot of discussion about this today, and I didn't want that to get lost in this discussion, that you're still open to strengthening and improving this bill. And I look forward to working with you on some of those areas that you already know about, that I believe can strengthen this bill. So thank you for that, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Chair recognizes Vice Chair Bernal.
Thank you, Chairman. As you can imagine, this part for me is a little bit uncomfortable. It's not often that the vice chair disagrees with the chair publicly, but one, you know how I feel about the bill, but also I actually think it's really important that we model for the body, especially some of our colleagues who are not in here, how we can disagree and then have to keep working together on other things. There's an expectation sometimes that we obliterate each other, and I don't think that that's necessarily healthy. That being said, I really appreciate the last line of questioning by Chairman Ashby, because I do think that's important. Almost in an uncomfortable way, in the last bill, we talked about how even though some things need to get better, that even though some things aren't perfect, that there's enough faith and respect amongst us that we can take the time between now and the floor to make things better, that things are not fully baked. And while that has to be true for school finance, I think it's my expectation, everyone else's, and we just heard your commitment, which I appreciate, that that's also the case here. And I want to make sort of my pitch there. I understand people's feelings about opportunity. I understand what people are saying about helping families. We can all come up with an example of some person, one way or the other, that should or shouldn't benefit. But I can't help but think about our own philosophies, our own ideologies that we use in this building all the time. And does anyone know what a cranial remolding orthosis is? You do. Now. Right. It's a baby helmet, right? It's a baby helmet. And for about 8 years, I've been trying to, I promise this relates to the bill. For about 8 years, I've been trying to pass a bill.
I think we're way off that track by now, so go ahead.
For 8 years, I've been trying to pass a bill that would have Medicaid cover the cost of baby helmets. And for all those 8 years, I've been told no. And the reason I've been told no is this fear that somehow some black market cottage industry will be created where these things are overprescribed and kids who don't get it, who don't need it, will get it. That somehow there'll be too many baby helmets and kids who need it, not just for their brain development, but for cosmetic purposes, will get it. And they're not the ones who deserve it. So for 8 years, the answer has been no. The fiscal note on that bill is $1 million. $1 million. A no worth $1 million for baby helmets. Because we're worried that kids, babies, who don't need it will get it. That is the justification for that, for the no's. And yet here, I understand the 20% piece, and I understand what it's attempting to do, but in light of that, what I hear it saying is not that it's limited to 20% of those students, but that it's reserved for them. That 20% of the bill is reserved for people that we already know don't need it. And the possibility of that group can grow. I'm not saying that's the spirit of it, Chairman, but in light of all the no's that some of us have endured over time, whether it comes to baby helmets or foster care or the uninsured, it is hard to stomach and swallow, right? Because we've been told no for a variety of reasons for people who are certainly more deserving at a cost that is far less than this is in its first year, its second, or the remainder. And so I'd like for us to keep that in mind. There's two ways that those of us who are in the position that I'm in can go about our work here. One is being a hard no and just saying no all the time. And sometimes our job is to change policy for the better and make it the best version of itself that it can be. And so that's where I think we are. In the end, we may vote no, but if we really are serious about making sure that this bill helps the people that we believe it's supposed to help, then the question I would ask is, does the version in front of us do that? And if it doesn't, then just like the last bill, Chairman, we take the time between now and the floor to change it to make sure that it does that in a way not just that makes the people who are still going to vote no comfortable, but also for the people who honestly feel pressured to vote yes, can be more enthusiastic about. I think that you've shown that you're willing to do that. I'm banking on the same effort and the same goodwill that you've shown with the last bill that we've worked very closely together on and will continue to do, that goodwill makes its way to this bill as well. Thank you.
Okay. Representative Schoolcraft, for a question, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Hinojosa for a question.
Yes, on page 29 of the bill, it says tuition and fees refund prohibited. It says an education service provider or vendor of educational products may not charge participating child an amount greater than the standard amount charged for that service or product by the provider or vendor. A standard amount is not defined. It has come to my attention that there are religious schools that have one price for people of that faith and a different price for the people who are not of that faith. And I'm asking whether that will continue to be allowed for recipients of this voucher.
Okay, so it's like, yeah. I don't know if I understand completely. So you're talking about a product?
I think this also applies to tuition,
Yeah.
but either way.
Okay, you're talking about tuition. Okay, I'm
Right.
sorry. Yeah.
Either way, for example, can a Catholic school, my understanding that there are religious schools, and I don't want to call out one religion and get it wrong, but there are religious schools that have different prices depending on whether or not you're a person of that faith. Will recipients of this voucher be allowed to continue to discriminate based on religion, charging one price for people of the faith and a different price for people not of that faith?
I am not advised if that occurs. I know that, from what I understand, Catholic schools provide scholarships to students regardless of their religious beliefs, and then these would be able to access. If a student is attending a Catholic school, they can use their ESA just as they could in any other setting.
And so if a school does provide that whether or not you are of the faith, you pay a different price, will that continue to be allowed if they receive a voucher?
I believe what the operation, if you will, of a private school or Catholic school in this instance will remain that'll remain the purview of that school.
So they'll still be able to charge different prices based on
I don't know
religion.
that they do that, but
Okay. I want to speak to something that Representative Ashby brought up, and this idea of the sunset. I would ask that if we're going to, or actually either way, I would ask that the chairman look at the part of the bill that does an annual report and demographic report. Those two are separate for some reason. So it's page 33, goes through 34 and 35. And I'm not understanding why those two things are separate. I would ask that we combine those and that we also look at what this doesn't cover in this report is how students who were not in private school, so who are coming from the public school, and the figure I have from the LBB report is they project that only 14% of students will leave the public school. So most of the kids, according to LBB, will be private school kids. But for those kids that leave the public school and go to private school, how it impacts them. That currently is not data that's collected. It doesn't divide up the kids who are already in private school who are now getting the voucher versus the kids for whom this is a new experience for them. Okay. And so I would ask that we do that. And I just want to finally correct the record and say, I believe my colleague is misremembering that we heard from the TRS Executive Director, Mr. Guthrie, for our school finance bill. We never got to hear him for this bill, any iteration of this bill. And while I really appreciated hearing the expertise from our colleague who sits on the pension committee, I think that it's a very important information, and I wish we would have had a resource witness here from the TRS to answer those questions.
Ready? We're good? Yeah. All right. Is there objection to adoption of the committee substitute? The chair hears none. The substitute is adopted. The chair moves that SB 2 as substituted be favorably reported to the full House with the recommendation that it do pass and be printed. The clerk will call the roll.
Chairman Buckley?
Aye.
Vice Chair Bernal?
No.
Allen?
No.
Ashby?
Aye.
Bryant?
No.
Cunningham?
Aye.
Dutton?
No.
Frank?
Aye.
Hinojosa?
No.
Hunter?
Yes.
Kerwin? Leach?
Yes.
Leo Wilson?
Aye.
Schoolcraft?
Aye.
Talarico?
No.
There being 9 ayes, 6 nays, the motion prevails. Chair lays out as pending business House Bill 6 by Chairman Leach. Members, this is the bill we heard previously that is relating to discipline in public schools. The chair offers a committee substitute and recognizes Chairman Leach to explain the changes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, committee members. Let me very quickly